Welcome to Through the Glass. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm very excited to have Sarah Tantillo, educator, author, on the show today. Good friend, good person, smart person. I'm definitely going to learn a few things today. I hope you do too. Sarah, hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. It's a little weird.
Why is this weird?
It's just weird because there's so much space between us.
Really? That's been weird the last year? That there's space between people? What have you been doing the last year?
This is more than 6 feet, Mike.
We're at a good...
It's a good 10 feet.
I think we're in the 12 range.
Yeah, it could be.
So that's what's weird? The distance? The glass?
The glass. The microphone, the camera.
That's not your normal experience?
No, sitting on my porch talking to you is more normal.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I've known you for some time. You, let's talk about the educator part, not necessarily the author part yet. And the educator part is how I met you. Mm-hmm. I was teaching at the time, and you were a consultant probably for many schools, as many consultants are, doing professional development and education for educators. Yes, folks, teachers get teachers to help them teach. And I was one of those people at the time that desperately needed a teacher to teach me how to teach. And that's how I met you. Mm-hmm. And that was lovely. I was coming into teaching very green. Let's just say green. I was green, straight up.
Green but enthusiastic.
Green but enthusiastic, which is not so bad.
And receptive.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you brought some notes too, I guess.
I'm just remembering. That was a while ago.
I was like, please show me what the fuck to do. My God, please help me. And you came in and showed me some strategies to use for teaching language arts, which, you know, is the newer, more recent term for reading and writing. And it was invaluable. I can't overstress how helpful that was.
Thank you.
Not only to have poignant, and on point information coming my way, but just to have it come in a cool way, not under the stress of the school day, mm-hmm. not under the perceived stress of having your superiors telling you this, and you're feeling like, oh, fucking up. And it was just really nice, and you were kind and you were generous with your time. I get a feeling that you went a little above and beyond what your consultant contract may have had slated out for someone like myself and other teachers, but I just really appreciate that. Thanks. So I want to start off by thanking you.
Well, thank you
for being one of those people early on during that part of my life that was really helpful, really kind, and just on point. Thank you.
Thank you. You're trying to make me cry in the first 10 minutes?
My father was talking about crying today. He had a near-death experience exactly 12 months ago.
Oh, no.
And so he was flatlined for a bit.
Oof.
And so now apparently he's a crier.
Oh.
And it was funny. We're hanging out. We stopped over at my parents' house, and my wife and I are real close to being fully vaccinated. So we're hanging out outdoors with my folks. Mm-hmm. And my dad just keeps bringing things up and saying them in a way that's like real emotional, almost like he's like trying to get it going. I'm like, dude, you're the only one who's in this near-death, like post near-death cry experience. Like, take it down over there. Have another glass of wine. Chill out. I'm joking.
Well, that's good though. It's something. It touched him somehow.
Well, I come from a long line of guys who are not trying to tap into that, as many people are.
Yeah.
Many guys.
Yeah, it's a pretty common family pattern.
We're right in there.
Yeah.
We're right in the classic family pattern, even the classic Italian, American, and Italian. Mm-hmm. We sort of straddle that line where some of the traditions are very Italian-American and some of the really ridiculous ones are just straight Italian. And but they're there.
Yeah.
And I love them, and I can't stand them at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what's beautiful.
Yeah.
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 What's wrong with education? How are you fixing it? What's the problem? What's the problem with education? Why school? As with Mike Rose, I read a book some years ago.
Yeah.
I think Mike Rose. Why school?
Mm-hmm.
What should school be?
Well, I think the challenge for us now is, well, let me start here. I think we've realized how important school is to not just the children, the adults, society. You know, when we had to switch gears from in-person to remote instruction, I think a lot of people realized, you know, the impact of having school, and not just as a form of babysitting, but really as a form of community. And that loss of community was really, really potent and damaging to children and adults who were used to being in that space. And, you know, I know from talking to parents who were at home with their kids, trying to support them while they were getting instructed and so forth, they had a new perspective on the work that teachers do, trying to herd the cats. And that's one point of view. But I mean, the other is, you know, really it's an important community, right? It's an important part of the larger community. And I think people have started to appreciate that a little bit more this past year. So, you know, I don't know that I want to answer the question of what's wrong with school as much as I want to say what the potential of school is. And the potential of school is to be a really powerful place for children and adults to work together, to strengthen their community bonds, for children to learn and grow, and really for adults to learn and grow as well, to model that learning and growth for the children that are there, you know.
Well, every adult is just thinking about their own experiences from school, which of course are glazed over in half-right memory,
right, or
and no context.
Well, but that's true. And depending on the nature of the organization that you work for, those nostalgic memories may be disrupted, to use the word we mentioned earlier when we were getting ready for this, by the level of support and coaching that you get in your organization. So, you know, kind of what I did when I came in to consult in the school that you were working in, you know, as an outsider coming in, you know, just to try to make your life easier, really, to try to help you, you know, have some tools to work with. You know, increasingly schools and networks, charter school networks like the one I work in, Great Oaks Legacy Charter Schools in Newark, and even districts are doing a lot more to coach teachers, to support them on a more routine basis, you know, and that coaching is what affects what they're putting in front of kids and how they're interacting with students.
You can't say it enough.
Yeah.
It was pointed out to me when I was going down that path, like, oh, by the way, you know, very little the training you have is actually going to train you for actually teaching. I'm like, wait a minute, but these are teaching classes. Wait a minute,
Did you? I can't remember what your background was. Did you go? You were in business and then you came in. Did you go through the alternate route, or did you?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I was working in corporate for a very long time.
Yeah.
Had a great job, like solid. I was in the, you know, similar to what I'm doing now in the audio visual sort of world, and it was great. I had a great team. I had a great boss. I was doing well. There was room for growth. Mm-hmm. It was spot on. Mm-hmm. I was bored as hell.
Yeah.
I was bored as hell. So I was already working in Lawrenceville, and, you know, literally down the street was Rider University, and they had a solid education program for certification. Mm-hmm. And I said, all right, well, what the hell?
Yeah.
Let me, I'm always trying to scratch an itch. I have a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I said, all right, so what's that, 2 years? All right. Let me do that for 2 years and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And sort of, you know, my wife and I, we planned it all out, and so it went.
So wait, was it a master's program, or did you go through the New Jersey alternate route to certification program?
Sorry, you're asking a lot of technical questions here, and I'm not sure I remember the answer. It was not a master's. I do not have a master's. It was, I don't know, what would you call postgraduate certification?
Okay, yeah.
I had
So it wasn't the alternate. I want to tell you the difference, because I went through the alternate route. When I graduated from undergrad, I went straight into teaching. I had like 60 hours of alternate route training the summer before I started.
No, it was not alternate route.
Yeah.
But educate me
Yeah.
and everybody listening on the differences, please.
Yeah, well, the alternate route to certification, it's actually an interesting story how the alternate route came about. Actually, I wrote about it in my latest book, Hit the Drum, which it tells a story of how the report A Nation at Risk came out. I don't know if you remember that, in 1983. And then all these ripple effects started to happen in the field because the report came out and basically said, you know, we're doing this terrible disservice to our children and to our country, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but basically that. And it got the attention of the governors, interestingly, because Al Shanker, who was then the head of the National Teachers Union, the AFT or UFT, I forget which one at the time, he's kind of was doing both at various points, came out, read the report, and then told his counterparts, they're right, and we need to do something about this.
What were they identifying as the disservice?
Just that we were not providing a strong education to the education being provided to a lot of children was mediocre.
How were they measuring that at the time?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm sure they collected a lot of data. I haven't read that report in a while. I just read the summary, you know, when I was working on this book a few years ago. But, you know, I mean, I don't think it was a surprise to anybody that, you know, when you looked at graduation rates in various places and so forth, that we were not doing the best job we could for everybody. But the political interesting thing was that Al Shanker, the union leader, said to his counterparts, this is right, and we need to say yes, let's follow up on this. And so unlike many government reports that normally just get like sort of lightly shared and then, you know, put in a drawer somewhere, this one had all these impacts in that basically governors felt like they had political support to step up and say, oh, I want to be the education governor. So people like Bill Clinton said, I want to be the education governor, and, you know, Lamar Alexander and some of these other folks. And then they started to put new policies in place. And one of the new policies that came out, started in New Jersey actually, was the alternate route to certification, because there was a teacher shortage back in the early to mid 80s. And so one of the things that we needed to do was to, you know, raise the number and quality of people going into the field. So New Jersey was actually the first state to have an alternate route.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Who was the governor then? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was Kane.
Okay.
Yep, Tom Kane. And Saul Cooperman was the commissioner.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step, at least in this state, was identifying the fact that, damn, and why weren't, in your opinion, or according to the data, why weren't there a lot of teachers in the field at that time? And what time are we in right now? Are we in the 80s?
That report came out in 83. The alternate route in New Jersey started in 85. Just to give you some context, I graduated in 87. And I actually got an internship working in the New Jersey alternate route to certification office, which was a fascinating experience. And I mean, it's like an amazing story, right? So this guy, Jack Osander, who used to be the dean of admissions at Princeton back in the 70s, comes to campus. I was at Princeton, comes to campus to interview people who might want to teach. And I went in for the interview, and he's like, hey, you know, I got an internship like just down the road. You know, when you're done with your thesis, do you want to come start working with me? And I was like, and he's like, and you can help yourself find a job. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. So I went and started working for him. And it was in this old carpet warehouse on Quaker Bridge Road, the state building. And it was like, I don't know if there were any windows, honestly. It was the darkest place. And there were all these like cubicle, like, you know, sort of, what are they, sort of like burlap covered cubicle walls. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you're describing office space.
Yeah, but worse than that. 'Cause it just was so dark in there. And it just like, it was so dark. And he used the walls to hang things up and resumes. And so he takes me into the office, which was like, about as big as this space that we're in now, this space that I'm in, like say about 10 by 10. And he points to the wall and he says, there's he's got thumbtacked up a row of, like science resumes and math resumes of people who are, at selective colleges who want to go into the alternate route. That was the push, was try to get people. And there were like 2 science candidates and like, maybe 10 math candidates. He's like, I'd like to use more thumbtacks. I mean, it started out very, very small.
So this is the brainchild. This is some Princeton brainchild business right here.
Well, I mean, and think about it. And this was in 1987, so there wasn't really an internet. There was no Zoom, right? Yes, you could call people, but how do you know who to call? So he would have to drive up and down the coast to go visit colleges to interview people. And, there was a lot of schlepping to do that and everything. Obviously, things have changed quite a bit. But I remember when the very first day I walked in there and he showed me everything, I was like, I know there aren't that many candidates right now, but we're going to have more candidates. And we're going to have to organize these things better than like with thumbtacks.
The south-facing wall.
And he was used to, he had a computer, but he was very much used to like typewriters. And the computers that the state had at the time were called deckmates. I don't know if you've ever heard of these. They had a gold key that was kind of like, I guess, sort of like an Apple key or whatever. It just kind of did various things. And I was like, what is this? And I was like, we need a database. And I was a comp lit major. Like, I didn't even know much about databases, but somehow I intuitively knew that, like, I think we're going to need a database. And I'm like, there must be some way to do that on this computer. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. He's like, he hands me this like 5-inch thick, like 5 by 5, 3-ring binder notebook. He's like, read this and see if you could figure it out. And so I took it home. I had such a headache that day. I was like, oh my God, how are we going to organize this stuff? So we got it organized. So
this is when you were sidebar. Graduating Princeton?
Yeah. So the spring of my senior year, I started the internship and then I continued through the summer and then I got hired. I taught in Rumson the first year. And then I went back to Southern Regional, which is where I had graduated from high school and taught there for a few years as well.
And this gentleman you were referring to before, he was the former admissions director for Princeton?
He had been, yes. Mm-hmm.
But he had stepped away to start this project?
Right. The Governor Kane invited him to take this role, I think, or Cooperman did.
So you were right there on the front lines of this movement. It was an interesting time. At least to increase the amount of teachers.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does that play into, I don't want to make so broad of a entrance here, but how does that play into charter schools? The word charter school, the words charter school, that seems to bring up either total confusion in people, like, okay, like I've heard the word, but I don't know what that is, or it's a hot button thing. Yeah. And I have my own feelings about it. I've been in that world. Yeah. But can you take us through what the hell are charter schools?
Right.
And why are they there? And what's people's beef? What's the beef?
Sure. So the first thing is what are they? They're independent public schools of choice. So they're independent in that they're independently governed. They have their own school board, not elected. They're public schools. They have to follow, everything that's in Title 18A, which is the New Jersey education law, charters have to follow. So, expulsion laws and pension and state testing, all those things they have to follow. Charters have their own regulations because charters are a law within New Jersey education law. They were formed by the passage of, the New Jersey Charter School Program Act. It was signed in 1997. 96. Sorry, 96. And, their choice in that wherever they're formed, people can choose to go to them. First choice is usually preference is given to people who live in the district where the charter is located, or if they're a regional charter, they could pull from different districts, and preference would be first given to people who live in those districts.
And that's done on a lottery system.
Right. It's a random lottery. If you have more applicants than you have slots, by law, they have to have a lottery. Yep. So it's funny that you asked this question in the context of the alternate route, because, in fact, I made the argument in my book, Hit the Drum, shameless plug again, that...
We'll get into that. We'll get into the book.
Yeah, but that's actually what led to the kind of unfolding of charter schools. Having the alternate route caused a lot of people to go into the field of education who might not otherwise have gone into the field. Entrepreneurial types, people who, like you, came in from a business background, or just had other careers and wanted to get into education, or people who went through Teach for America, which was started after New Jersey's education department started the alternate route. If the alternate route doesn't start in New Jersey, Teach for America doesn't exist. Teach for America then brought a lot of college students who maybe previously hadn't thought about going into education.
Yeah, you'll have to explain this for our listeners.
Yeah, so Teach for America is a program that was started by Wendy Kopp in 91, 92, something like that, 1990, I think. It was basically, it was kind of like a Peace Corps for education idea that, you'd go into education for at least 2 years. The target area was, urban and rural districts in the country where there were a lot of teacher shortages. And so that was the focus. And I think the first Teach for America Corps was like 500, college kids from all around the country. And some of them went into, New York City, and some of them went into Baton Rouge, Louisiana, New Orleans, Houston, different places. And some of the people who went into Teach for America, like the guys who started KIPP, right? The KIPP, K-I-P-P, Knowledge is Power Program School down in Houston initially. They didn't start it as a charter. Now it's a really expansive charter school network, but charters didn't exist when they started their program within the Houston School District. And Dave Levin, who was one of the co-founders with Mike Feinberg, wanted to come back to New York City, where he was from, and so he went back to New York City. And at the time, New York City still didn't have a charter law either, so he was just a program within the district, and then things started to change. So so charters, came about to some degree because people were getting into the field who were kind of change agents, if you will. And then other things started to happen. People, like, for example, Al Shanker, the teachers union leader, was reading about, this idea of a charter school, and he started to promote it. He used to write a weekly column. I don't know if you remember that, because I've been 28 for longer than you, but he used to write a weekly column in the New York Times that was a paid column. That was basically an advertisement, but it was prominently featured. And I remember reading about charter schools, and he was promoting them, which was pretty amazing when you think about it, because in the years that followed some of the charter laws passing, we've seen teacher union opposition to charter schools because a lot of charters are not unionized. So, to get to your question about like what's the beef that some people have, it's teachers unions can't get paid dues for non-members, and charters are outside of the district parameters, so they don't have to be within the district unions, and so they don't want ununionized schools because then nobody will be paying the dues.
some of the things I've heard as well from non-teacher people, non-union people, I've heard arguments of, well, the mere existence of a charter school can maybe say that the public school system might be failing, and that feels problematic to people. And then also from a tax perspective, hey, I moved to this town because I wanted to pay taxes to this school, or I moved to this town, I don't have children, but I'm okay with the tax structure that pays to that school, and now that tax structure is additionally divvied to charter schools. Can you speak to those two arguments?
Yeah. That's interesting because it doesn't actually raise your taxes to have a charter in your district. The charters only get, really, in New Jersey, it's about 70 cents on the dollar per kid, and the district keeps about 30 cents for not even educating the children that leave the district to go into the charter.
So wait, so how does that work? If the taxes don't raise, then I guess what people are saying, though, is then that it's taking the dollar from the public, it's taking the public school dollar. Is that what they're really trying to say?
So I think the thing to think about, and part of the reason people like me got into charters in the first place, is to improve public education overall. So there's not a dichotomy between public schools and charter schools, because charters are public. Districts are one form of public school. Charters are another form of public school. And, Ted Koldery, who's kind of thought of as like the godfather of the charter school movement, wrote some papers early on about, breaking up the monopoly of the system. And he didn't use the word monopoly. I'm trying to remember the exact phrasing that he used. I'm having a senior moment here. But that idea that, if you, as a district, if there's no competition, if there's nobody challenging you or holding you accountable for anything, then, you have no incentive to make any changes or improve in any way, right? And, given what the, that report that I mentioned earlier found, right, that, we were not serving all students well, right? And I mean, you could still look at many of our inner city districts today and say, well, in some cases they're doing a little better. It's largely because of the charter presence that's raised the quality of schooling in those cities, Newark being a great example of that. If you look at, Newark, Camden, Jersey City, Patterson, student state test passing rates tend to be, significantly lower than the state average, have tended to be. But, we're seeing performance go up in the charter sector, which then kind of lifts the boat for the kids that live in that city. It gives them opportunities. So, I think that a very simplistic view of charters is that, like, you're just taking my money to pay, for this other school, but you're not serving the children anymore. They're going to this other school. So why should you have the money for the kids if the kids are over here, right? It's interesting too, the point you made earlier, Mike, about, I guess you were sort of alluding to the notion of like, I moved into this district, like a hypothetical, I moved into this district because I wanted good schools and now whatever. One of the first charter schools in New Jersey was the Princeton Charter School. And it was started by parents who had been on the Princeton school board and who were frustrated because they felt like the curriculum wasn't rigorous enough in Princeton. And they wanted to start a school that would, have a more rigorous curriculum. And so they started that school, and it was a small school to start. And now it's to the point where, honestly, the district needs that school to continue to operate because they have a building and they have teachers and they're, if all those kids left the charter school and tried to come back into the district right now, they wouldn't have space for them.
That's interesting. And that's sort of where I was headed in this conversation. you talked a bit about the movement and the genesis of it having to do with teacher shortages. At the end of the day, how does economic situation correlate to the cropping up of charter schools? What's the correlation between economics and the location of charter schools?
Well, I mean, I think you can answer this in a few different ways. The first thing that comes to my mind is that education is the foundation of our economy, right? And that, the more educated our populace is, the stronger their performance will be in the workplace and in their citizenry and in the democracy. I mean, there's a lot of correlations between, education level and economic performance for individuals and for collective, for us collectively, right? So the better educated people are in our country, the better our economy is going to do, right? I think we can probably all agree on that. And so therefore, if we don't have a good education for some people or some people in some places, then those people in those places are going to be a drain on the economy. They're going to need services. They're going to need, to be taken care of if they can't take care of themselves, or if the opportunities aren't there for them. And there's really, and that's wrong, right? I mean, there's no reason for people to not have opportunities in this country, right? I mean, we're really a wealthy country on many levels, but not everybody sees that wealth.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And I agree with you 100% that, the more, and by the way, educated can mean several things to different people.
And I don't mean everybody has to go to like an Ivy League school or anything. I just mean, like a certain basic level of education so that you can make your own choices about what you want to do with your life.
Choice is freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Choice is freedom. Having the ability to choose between things, and education helps you to understand the differences between things so you can better choose.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So how did you jump from the elite of the elite institutions being at Princeton University? How do you make your way from this space to what might not maybe get described that way? You're mentioning charter schools in towns and in districts that maybe wouldn't be in the same sentence with Princeton or something like that. How do you and others sort of make that connection other than just simply noticing the gap in education in the country? Or is it that simple?
Well, I mean, I got into education because I wanted to, make a difference. I wanted to be of use in the world in some way. And once I got into I started working in districts, and districts aren't perfect either, even in, fancy suburban places or less fancy suburban places. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. And, even within a large district, like I went to Southern Regional High School down in Manahawkin, and I got a really good education there. Obviously, I went back, and when I was teaching there, one of the things that I noticed was that there was we had at the time that I was teaching there, and this was in the late 80s, early 90s, we had I think 5 different tracks for students. So there was honors, college prep, regular, average, whatever. And then there was, a couple levels of remedial, whatever. But average, I found out after being there for a minute, average meant you had failed English or history at least once. And that you didn't really see yourself as going to college, and you were really struggling as a student often, and you just kind of hadn't found your way yet. And I ended up pretty quickly starting to teach some of these students. And I realized that, they were hungry to learn, but they just kind of didn't, they needed something a little different. And I ended up starting a humanities program with a history teacher there that was, truthfully, it was a college prep humanities program targeting the so-called average kids. and we had 25 kids in each of our rooms, and sometimes we'd bring them together for all 50 in one gigantic room. And we designed the curriculum in a really interdisciplinary way, a lot of project-based learning, stuff that they weren't used to having, and they loved it so much that every single one of them, after it was in their junior year, signed up to try to take it in their senior year for like humanities too.
Wow.
Yeah, which was really, that was like, aw, because I mean, we did pitch it to them, and some of them were like, all right, I'll try it. Like, it couldn't be any worse than what I'm going to get anyway, I guess is probably how they thought about it. But once they got into it, they really dug it. So.
What age group of kids is this?
So that was juniors, and we did juniors and seniors.
And where was this?
That was at Southern Regional. That was back in, like I said, that was in the early to mid 90s.
Students respond really well to challenges. And I didn't have a sense of that. I didn't grasp that until I was working in education and seeing, just how remarkably well children and students can do in high pressure, high stress, raising the bar way above the normal that you just described, a shitty normal. You described it not a great normal. And
right.
If that's like your, okay, well, you're doing well. That's your B or whatever.
Right.
That sucks.
Right.
And I was shocked at how well, I shouldn't have been, but I was, to be honest, at how much children can rise to the occasion of everything if they are challenged appropriately, and if they know that someone, just has to be at least one person, is going to be there to just to be there, period. Actually, I could probably just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Just to be there. And what I realized was, for most of the kids that had struggled in school or had struggled in life, or their families had struggled in life, it was really a lack of resources. It was not having that human being, whomever it be, not there. Just that uncertainty, that toxic stress, the uncertainty in life. And it wasn't the curriculum, it wasn't the challenge, it wasn't I can't do this, or it was just the fear of not having support or having people around. And it blew my mind, and it shouldn't have, but it did. It blew my mind how well children respond with structure. In the beginning of this conversation, you talked about how, I thought this was such a great way to start. You're like, the pandemic and all that really put a focus on how important, or how it's not an easy gig,
right,
to be a teacher, and all these parents. And I've heard people say that before. And the instinct inside of me is like, well, those are stupid people. How could they not know that? How have you ever tried to teach a class? Like, how could you not? But then I realized, well,
no, most people haven't.
Most people are in school as students, and then they leave, never to return.
Right.
And there are people who go through school and never leave, and then there are people who come back around, and you have to be sensitive to all of them. But it's incredible. It's incredible. Can you speak to that a bit?
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right that, people's perspective of what happens in education depends on, what they've been through, right? Because, I mean, if you come in, as I did, through the alternate route, your impulse is to teach the way you were taught if you have no other training, right? And I was lucky in that I had a lot of really good teachers in middle school and high school, just fantastic teachers. And I learned a lot by osmosis. And later, when I became a teacher, I reflected on, some of the things that they did. And I was like, wow, this person was fantastic. Like, I was so lucky to be in the room with this person for Latin for 3 years, Mr. Speck, it was amazing. And
well, it says a lot about you too, because so many people, and I'm one of those people, can be in a room with a great teacher, and it's not happening because you are somewhere else. So I think there's a combination there, and that's what's really special about you. It seems like you had the experiences and the context, but within you was the receiver.
Well, I think I've always been kind of obsessed with how people learn. Two things really: how people learn and how people think about writing. So I'm kind of obsessed with like what it takes to be a good writer too. And so I think the combination of both of those things has me a lot in my head thinking about, what works for people who are trying to get better at learning or get better at writing. So I've always been kind of obsessed with both of those things. And so I think I was more attentive than a lot of people to.
Yeah, I get that feeling.
What
You might have been towards the front. You might have been towards the front if it was your choice.
I took some notes.
I might have been looking at the back of your head if it was my choice. You wouldn't have been looking at my head.
Yeah, I did tend to sit near the front. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, but I mean, you're right. I mean, you do tend to kind of teach the way you've been taught, right? And so one of the things that's exciting for me about my work now is how I'm able to work directly with school leaders and instructional leaders and teachers, especially new teachers, to try to help them get some tools very quickly so that they can become really effective.
It's such a tough gig. I cannot stress it enough.
It is, but it's an important one. Don't scare people, Mike. We need more people.
Was I being scary?
It is a tough gig. I'm not going to lie, but it's an important one.
It's so important.
We need so many more good people.
It's so important, and it's so misunderstood.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm afraid I'm going to say something like
No,
scary.
go
Now
ahead.
I got nothing to say anymore. Let's talk about your book.
Well,
Let's talk about your book.
Okay, sure. Twist my arm.
First of all, thank you for bringing this.
Sure.
This is not the first book you've given me. Your first book, I believe, is called The Literacy Cookbook.
That's correct.
And you hooked me up with that.
Yep. And then Literacy in the Common Core was my second one. And then I don't know if I gave you Using Grammar to Improve Writing. That was my third book.
No, apparently we're not as close as we
well,
used to be.
apparently you're not teaching English anymore. So you
that might be
probably don't need it.
Well, I like books.
All right, well, come by. I've got a whole bunch in my living room.
All right. Yeah. Hit the Drum, an insider's account of how the charter school idea became a national movement by Sarah Tantillo, our guest today. Why the title, Hit the Drum?
Well, that title was inspired by the very first day I went to one of the first 13 charter schools to open in New Jersey, which was North Star. And I was running the New Jersey Charter School Resource Center. I had started it and was running it after I left teaching in '96. And the New Jersey law had just passed for charter schools. And I wanted to get involved. And it's a long story about how I got involved, but essentially I got involved and was able to start this organization. And I was just doing everything I could to help people start and run charter schools in New Jersey once the law passed. And so the first day they opened, I was visiting as many schools as I could, and I happened to be there at North Star. Right around lunchtime, I walked in the door, and the kids were cleaning up, and I met with Norman Atkins, who was one of the co-founders, and Jamie Vrilley was the other one. And he said, he told me what they had been doing that morning. They were spending time in classes talking about their 4 core values with the kids in classes: caring, respect, responsibility, and justice. And he said, so we're going to do this thing in a minute. You'll see. And so everybody cleans up the lunch buckets, clean their tables, and then they come over and they're in this big open area. And 72 5th and 6th graders stand in a big circle. And they had also just eaten cake, which cracks me up. Norman was kind of sheepishly telling me, like, we gave them cake for the birth of the school. And I think he was sort of like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have given them that much sugar. But it was fine. It worked out great. And they stood there while Jamie and Norman talked about, what does it mean to be caring? What does it look like? What's justice? What does it mean to be part of a community? How do you show respect? And there was a discussion. I was watching this unfold right in front of me. It was a discussion between them and 72 5th and 6th graders on their very first day of school in Newark, New Jersey, downtown Newark, New Jersey. And so they're wrapping up the discussion, and Jamie says, okay, he says, we have this, we have this like contract, and here's all the core values. And he says, if you'd like to be part of our community, here's what I want you to do. And he says, I want you to come over this table. I want you to sign the contract. And then he says, I want you to hit the drum hard, like this. And he has this djembe drum, and he hits it really hard. And he says, and then come back and join us in the circle. And he says, okay, who'd like to go first? And this kid, Dwayne, goes first. And Dwayne comes over, signs the thing, hits the drum, goes back. The next person goes over, sign, hits the drum, goes back. And I'm just standing there like trying not to cry, but crying, because they're just silently just doing this. And the drum just kept going, and they were all just joining this beautiful community. It was just really an amazing scene.
What is the significance of the drum? Because I've seen the drum.
Yeah, it's a call to community.
In many charter schools.
Yeah.
There's this primal thing.
Yeah.
Well, there's a primal thing in music.
Sure.
And you could distill music down to rhythm, and you could distill rhythm down to drum.
Yep.
What is the significance psychologically?
Yeah.
On a child?
When
it comes to making a covenant.
Right, exactly. It was a covenant. Norman and Jamie when they were starting the school, they went around and visited a lot of other schools to try to get good ideas, find best practices. And one of the schools, I can't remember the name of the school, but they saw this drum, like a drumming ceremony where it was a call to the community circle. So every day they were going to have a community circle. This was the very first one. And they were building their community, and the drum was going to then become part of the morning. Kids would play the drum to call people to the circle. That was how they called people to the circle. And so this was the first day, and they hit the drum to signify, I'm in. I want to be part of this. It was beautiful.
It is beautiful.
So, for me, it was very symbolic of the whole movement, that idea that, people were called to action. It was a call to action. And a lot of people responded to that call. And it was, a lot of caring, committed citizens who sat around their kitchen table with other people and dreamed and made plans and, did this really hard, difficult thing to start schools. You think starting a business is hard. Starting a school, it's a really hard business. So,
What drew you in that direction instead of maybe staying in what might be considered the ivory towers and the Ivy Leagues and the bougie world? Why?
What drew me into charters, you mean?
Yeah, so you're coming from Princeton, and I assume there's lots of resources there, and Princeton's history is second to none, and the connections are second to none, and all of these things. I don't always associate it with people going in and grinding in these philanthropic values, although I'm sure that's there too. I just don't associate them, is my point.
Yeah.
Did you feel that there was two different paths you could go down when you left something like a Princeton?
Yeah, well, I won't lie to you. As a senior, I was frustrated in 1987 that the recruiters who came to campus were investment banking and marketing, people.
And you were comparative lit?
I was comparative lit.
What is that? What does that even mean?
I studied French and Spanish. Yeah. I wrote my senior thesis on Hemingway and Faulkner's short stories.
Okay.
So they had a lot of flexibility. You had to learn the languages, but then you could write about whatever you wanted as long as it was literature.
Okay.
I love literature. I love books. I love learning. So teaching, was a good place for me to turn. But yeah, Jack, as I said, came to campus to interview people for the alternate route. But other than that, there was a teacher prep program, but it was a really modest program, and it was difficult. I looked at it, but it was difficult. I couldn't see a way to fit it in and still take all the classes that I wanted to take at the time because of the way it was structured. So I didn't go that route. I just went through got my bachelor's, and then I went into teaching. So
And you've always,
it was good to have that opportunity, because otherwise I'm not sure what I would have done, honestly. I needed to get a job.
well, you would have been an investment banker, of course.
No.
And books have followed you. You started hooking me up with books the second I met you.
Yeah, that's my thing.
You gave me Michael Crichton's maybe an autobiography, Travels.
Yeah, his autobiography. That's a wild book.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It starts with his experiences in medical school.
Yeah, where he cuts open the nose of somebody in a... Yeah.
The book opens, folks.
Yes.
This is like totally just my memory. I don't know how I even have a memory.
Mm-hmm.
But it was never good. It's getting a little sharper these days, which goes against what it should be doing these days. But Sarah hooked me up with, it's a book called Travels, Michael Crichton. Is that his autobiography?
Yeah.
It's so badass. So many people know Michael Crichton as the famous fiction writer.
Jurassic Park.
Big
all those kinds of books.
Big
Andromeda
books.
Strain, that's an old one.
Yeah, like just made for film. You know, not unlike a Stephen King in a way.
Yeah, kind of, but with more monsters usually.
More monsters. And this book opens up with, if I remember correctly, I mean, you jump right into Michael cutting open someone's face.
Right.
And you're just like, what? And it was such a hook.
Yeah.
And in the books you were giving me, you were teaching me how to hook students. You had given me something else. I think it was Andre Agassi's autobiography.
Right. Yeah, Open. That's a really good one.
That's a good one too.
Yeah.
And just in how you were showing me, you were just modeling how I should show the students in my class, and it was very impactful. It was so helpful.
That's great.
I don't know. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
But forget education. Let's forget about all that.
Yeah.
That business.
Yeah.
You play a lot of golf.
I don't play a lot of golf.
You said you didn't want to talk about golf, but I want to talk about it because I know this much.
I don't play a lot of golf anymore.
You played today?
I did play today, but barely, because it was everybody and their brother was out on the course. It would have been a 6-hour round if we played the whole round. It was 3 hours for 9 holes.
How'd you get into golf?
Oh, that's a funny story. I made fun of golf for 36 and a half years. In fact, when my cable company told me that they were adding the Golf Channel to my lineup, I almost wrote them a letter to complain, why do I have to pay for this? I was so anti-golf for so many years. But then one year I went down to a national meeting of charter school leaders. And, we had this, it was a kind of an informal group of about 15 people we were meeting to try to, actually we were trying to form that was when we were trying to form the National Charter School Alliance, the national organization. And we were down in Florida, and and the guys were all like, okay, we're done with our meeting. We're going to go play golf. And I was like, I don't want to miss anything. They're going to keep talking about this stuff. So I was like, oh, can I come? And they're like, oh, sure. Yeah, sure. I was like, well, I haven't played golf before. They're like, oh, it doesn't matter. Just come with us. And so we go to this course at in Kissimmee, Florida. And, rented clubs, whatever. And this one guy from Michigan told me just one thought, just pretend when you're taking the club back that you're like sweeping with a broom behind you and then sweeping forward. And just, that's it. And you'll hit the ball. Now, I was a really good field hockey player in high school. I was actually recruited to play in college, and I didn't. I played basketball instead. But, so I could swing a club. And so we're playing, and one of the guys, this guy Jim from Colorado, was getting really irritated because he was hitting balls, and we were like hitting like the people's roofs. It was like one of those courses where all the houses are right there. And he's like, where's your ball? And I'm like, it's right up there in the middle of the fairway. It's just like,
not quite as far, but centered.
And he's like, he couldn't believe that I never played before. And another woman who'd come along, also just because she didn't want to miss anything, she was just sitting on the cart. This woman, Shirley Menastra from DC, says, Jim, don't you think if she'd, played before, she would have bet money on this? But I was like, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this, and it's kind of fun, So, and then I went home and I started taking lessons, and the rest is history.
So you were a bit of a jock to begin with.
I was, yeah.
Field hockey, basketball.
Ran track too, yeah.
And you had a scholarship?
No, Princeton doesn't give scholarships. I just played. I played basketball for the first 2 years I was there.
What's that like? What's it like playing college ball at Princeton?
I liked playing. I liked my teammates. It was the Jadwin Gym is I don't know if you've seen it, but it's gigantic, and the women's team played opposite the men. So if the men were away, we were home, and vice versa. So the men's games would always have a huge crowd, and the women's games would have like 32 people in the stands.
Sure.
When I played in high school, we had it was SRO every game we played, whether it was home or away. There were always a ton of people there.
What does SRO mean?
Standing room only. Come on, you're a musician.
Well, I'm supposed to think for everybody who might be watching.
Oh, that's true.
Truth be told, I didn't know what that meant.
All right, well that's fine.
And then there's that.
All right. Well, anyway, so standing room only. Yeah, so it was a little demoralizing to spend that much time, like practicing, to just essentially be in another practice. Like we had as many people watching us practice as watching us play in games. So that was a little demoralizing. And plus I wasn't getting any money, and I'm the oldest of four, 3 other, siblings behind me who wanted to go to college. So my junior year I was an RA, so I got free room and board. So
you were crafty. You're so crafty.
Yeah.
The RA, I could totally see it.
Yeah.
I could totally see it. I had such a crush on my RA. The 1 year. And I think she knew that. And she's like, you're a dirtbag.
No.
Just follow the instructions.
Oh, no.
Just follow the instructions, dirtbag. Stop trying to, whatever I was trying to do. Not sure exactly. My game was low, so I'm sure it was like very easy to defend.
Right.
Simple movements. Psh, psh. Like,
she didn't need to do much Aikido on you.
It was very low skill. No combat required. Just the occasional head nod.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
I loved being an RA. I had such a blast.
So when you said you weren't making any money, were other athletes making money at the school?
No.
Because I understand.
Nobody was.
Oh, okay.
No. They can't give you money. Ivy Leagues are not allowed to give you athletic scholarships.
Only now, I think, there seems to be a debate around college sports and compensation.
I would say in the last few years it's heated up, yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I just started getting hip to this, and I don't have a strong opinion on it. Yeah. However, I know that college sports, particularly men's basketball and men's football, probably primarily, is exploited like crazy.
Yeah.
And brings in millions and millions and millions of dollars. So maybe those kids should be compensated. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I honestly, I don't really have a strong opinion on it either way.
It's interesting. They certainly
they get a free education, presumably.
That's a good point.
I
don't know.
I don't know if I'm assuming they get free education, free housing, but yeah, I don't know.
You have an annual event.
Yes.
I don't know if maybe I haven't been there in a couple of years, and
I'm sure
last year it didn't happen.
Right. Yeah. February 2020. It was the first year in 21 years that it didn't happen.
Tell us about Dumpling Fest.
Yeah. First we make them, then we eat them.
It's very simple. There you go, folks. Moving on. So anyway.
That's the story. And scene.
Sarah has Dumpling Fest, everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know. You really don't have to. You don't have to do anything. The big part is getting the invite, which is
you do have to make your dumplings if you're going to eat any.
All right. Well, you don't have to eat anything. You could sit and drink in the corner.
That's true.
True. I've talked with those people.
There are people who show up some people are like allergic to parts of the dumplings, so they don't eat them.
They're the ones drinking in the corner.
That's right. Yes.
And you show up, and what do? You bring a side.
Yeah.
And then you make your own dumplings. It's so cool. You get little squares of dough, and you wet the dough.
I make the mix the day, that day.
Yeah,
fresh.
you do all the hard work.
Well, it's not that hard. I have a recipe I got from I had a roommate who was Chinese when I was at Harvard Ed School, and she was the one that taught me the recipe.
She was the dumpling boss.
Yeah, it's great.
It is great because to show up at one of your dumpling fests, it's really just like kindergarten. You're like, okay, where's my smock? We're sitting at a big table and and you just make a fucking mess. And some of them look beautiful and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I made that. But then it goes in the hot water and it just goes away. Yeah. And then there's others where you're like judging on it, but then it comes out of the water and you're like, that looks quite nice actually. I'm a little pissed. Some people have technique.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, man. Yeah, how did Dumpling Fest start? And for anyone out there looking to have an interesting dinner party, I highly recommend dumplings.
Yeah.
How did that start?
Make your own.
I know the story, but tell the story.
Well, as I said, I had this when I was at the Harvard Ed School. I had two roommates, one of whom was a woman who was Chinese who taught me some different Chinese food recipes, and one of them was dumplings. And, I was like, wow, this is great. We should make a bunch of these and we should have friends over. And at the time, my space in our apartment consisted of a 10 by 15 room in which I had all of my belongings and my two cats illegally. And, I slept on a convertible sofa and, like all my books and everything. I don't know how I fit everything in there at that time. But anyway, I had a bunch of milk crates and we put like pillows on milk crates, and people sat around the perimeter of the room with tray tables and made dumplings on the tray tables. Because the kitchen in that apartment was like barely bigger than a shoebox. So
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It was fun.
There's community.
Yeah.
You're all working on the same goal.
Yep. And you produce something delicious.
That was my next point. And the most important part, you're doing something that you could all enjoy. I mean, that's really that's a metaphor for school in a way.
Yeah.
Community, working hard at something, and then at some point, maybe not after the water boils in the class, but certainly, but in your life, being able to reap the benefits of that and seeing the community that you're a part of, learning skills. What give us some wisdom. What does as you pointed out in the beginning of the show, parents got really hip to, whoa, how hard this is or how hectic it can be or whatever it is. How can a parent or a guardian best support their student, their child in school? It just in the basics, reading, writing, arithmetic, that kind of thing. What's the best advice you can give as an insider in schools? What's the best advice you can give to an outsider?
I mean, I think from an early age, it's so critical to, and this is going to sound really obvious, but talk to your children and, just have dialogue with them, right? And when they ask why, answer that question in full. Because the more you give them that practice in articulation, the better they're going to be able to express their ideas and their feelings and their thoughts fluently. So, I think that's one thing.
I've read that data. The more words a child hears, doesn't matter what words or the context, hopefully it's not in like a psychotic or angry tone, but maybe even that too holds true, the more they will pick up and use in their own life. So the more...
Yeah. Well, it builds your vocabulary. And so, I mean, there's been research done on this, right? They talk about the word gap, right? They did, I think I probably told you at one point about that study that they did. Hart and Risley did a study where they went into the homes of 42 families. About a third were working class, a third were welfare, and a third were, well off. And they went into the homes of the families. They all had one thing in common. They had a 1-year-old child who was just about to learn how to speak or learning how to speak. And they'd go in for an hour a month and they would tape record everything that was said to the child. Not in the room, but to the child. And then they transcribed it. And what they found was that there was a disparity between the kids from the lowest income level and the highest income level. The gap of number of words spoken per hour there was a gap of about 1,800 words. And so when you extrapolate, and that's per hour, that the kids from the wealthier families heard 1,800 more words per hour than the kids from the poorest families. And if you extrapolate that out from age 1 to when they get to school, you know, it's like 30 million words that they miss. And some people call it a word gap. I call it the explanation gap because, as I said, if you're not hearing words, you're not hearing explanations of things. You're not hearing, reasoning. You're not learning logical thinking.
Understanding and expression.
You know, this was brought home to me one night. I got home from work late and there was like nothing in the fridge. And I was just like, all right, I go to ShopRite and I got my little basket and I'm like, just like staggering around looking for something that I could microwave quickly. And I get near the meat section and this woman is pushing a cart. She's dressed professionally like me and she's got like a 3-year-old in the cart. And the kid leans over and goes, Mommy, can we have roast beef tonight? And she says, no, we can't have roast beef because blah, 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 blah. And she's like going through this whole explanation. And I was like, there you have it. This was not their first time in a grocery store, right? The kid knew what roast beef was. The mother was explaining it's too late to cook the roast beef. It's going to take too long. All that reasoning and articulation that this 3-year-old was then absorbing, right? As opposed to because I said so, which is because I said so, right? It's tempting to say that, but
I'm tempted all the time to give that response. But I come from a long line of Italian people who don't shut up. So there's we can't help ourselves.
So you go forward anyway.
Off topic, on topic. We come back to the roast beef. What were we talking about?
Weave it in later. Yeah. So I think that, it sounds really simple and easy, but, I think with so many people having different devices, their phones, their iPads, their this, their that. There was an article in the New York Times now about 4 or 5 years ago about parents in Park Slope, a wealthy community in Brooklyn, who were pushing their kids in strollers with headphones on, not talking to their children. And so it's, I think, become no longer just a kind of, rich, poor, word gap. It's more of a distracted parent word gap. And so that's something to keep in mind,
And distraction can happen at both extremes, right? So if you're under incredible stress and duress financially, you're working 3 jobs.
Right, multiple jobs, exactly.
You're not sure who's going to watch the child. Their cousin is watching them. The cousin's only 11.
Right.
I know all
playing
those.
Playing video games, watching TV, not talking to the kid.
But then on the other end, sort of the trappings of excess and apathy, sort of tuning out in that respect.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Or just not realizing the impact of what you're doing.
It's hard to realize the impact in real time of anything.
Yeah.
So much happens before a child even, is going to kindergarten, or if they're lucky, preschool. So during school years, how can a parent or guardian or adult best support education? Yeah.
I think, again, it's starting with talking to them about what's going on in school. What are you learning? Tell me more about it. Getting them to elaborate.
Nobody wants to talk after school, Sarah.
Yeah. Well.
What'd you work on? Nothing. Did you have a test today? Yes. Like, I have little ones and they're already at that level.
How old are they now?
Oh man, 9 and 6.
Oh my God, 9.
Yeah, 9. He's a big guy, and
remember when he was this big?
He is a reader.
Is he taller than you now?
Well, that's not that hard, Sarah. Thanks for pointing that out. No, he still has another 2 years. Thank you. No, he's perfect. The other one's perfect. This kid reads like I didn't pick up a book until college.
So what? Okay, so let's talk about how he became a reader. Did you or Julie read to him?
Julie, that was really her thing. That was part of their bonding.
Yep.
So anyone who has any relationship, be it child or a love interest or whatever, brother, sister, you pick your spots when you have your special moments, and her special moments would often be reading at night. And the types, I think they liked the same type of stories,
Okay.
which were fantasy
Uh-huh.
and all that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm happy to just grind on some dry ass nonfiction. I'm like, what's this economics book? Nothing good. So I have nothing to offer. I believe it came from that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always
Well,
reading.
that would be my next suggestion for parents is, read with your kids for sure.
Model.
Yeah.
That's all Julie. I was always reading and writing, but in my own space, in my own head. Julie made it a thing between them. Oh, he rips through books.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Big books.
I'm sure. That's fantastic.
Like, it's quite beautiful. And
great.
I'm in awe of that because I did not read for pleasure until college.
Oh.
I learned early on if you fold the pages enough, it looks like it's well worn.
That's so sad.
Oh, I was a sad kid. It's such a. I remember the one kid, 2 rows over from me, the nun. I went to Catholic school. These nuns, and they were physical nuns. These little Italian women had all this pent up, probably sexual frustration. Probably.
Yeah.
And so they were just like all the time. And 2 rows over, and the kids just totally bullshitting answers to questions. And she's like, it was as if we picked this up. I know you didn't read it. Look at the book. And she's showing how crisp the spine is. And as she's doing it, I'm like, oh my God. I gotta just bend it, fuck it up, spit, get it dirty, tear things. So I learned that trick. I was probably around 4th grade. Probably supposed to be reading The Pearl or something. And that's real. Those are real stories.
I believe it. That's so sad though.
No, I picked up so many tips and tricks to get me through school, and I was just a late bloomer. That's all.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the importance.
Yeah.
No, not even the importance. I just didn't realize what it was.
Yeah.
I couldn't sit still. I could still sort of barely sit still, and that's just where I was at.
Yeah.
And thank God, I'm actually quite happy for that.
Yeah.
It allowed me to sort of explore other parts of myself and the world, and thankfully I had a stable home and solid friends and just a decent enough surroundings to where something like that was like, all right, well, what's the worst that could happen to this one? We're not going to find him in a gutter, at least not yet.
He'll figure it out.
He'll probably figure it out.
Yeah, well, you were playing music, I'm sure, right?
Well, I mean, in grade school?
I mean, when did you first start playing instruments?
Oh, man. Early. 3rd grade, we started writing songs. My best friend, Mark, our moms were in a band together. Band might be painting it in like a more rock and roll way. It was the church group. But they were the guitarists in the group. So there were excellent acoustic guitars around. He had a keyboard, which was amazing. And there was an amplifier.
So what year would this be? When you're in 3rd grade, what year is that?
Early 80s.
Yeah, okay.
Early 80s. I was born in 1976.
Okay.
So how old are you when you're in 3rd grade? I don't even know. What are you, 10?
You're like 8, I think.
Okay, so you're like 8.
Yeah.
So it was 1984, and I fell in love with music instantly. My mom says, some of my earliest stuff was lip syncing and putting on shows and holding it, but we didn't have gear, so it was probably holding a hockey stick or a broom, classic, and lip syncing along to Southside Johnny songs, who was my favorite artist when I was young. Southside, still want you on the show. Please come on the show. You too, Joe Prinzo, who said no last time. That's his manager.
Okay.
He's like, we're not doing that right now. I'm like, well, I want you. Please come on the show when you're ready to do that.
He could be number 21.
He could be number 21. And so our moms had gear, and he had we had some junky equipment. There was an amplifier and just like a handheld microphone, like a looked like a CB radio kind of thing. And we found that it was so shitty.
Yeah.
It was so shitty, but if you held it up to the acoustic guitar and you played the acoustic, when it came out of that crappy speaker, so crappy mic, crappy speaker, beautiful acoustic guitar, that you had a distorted guitar. So we were recording
Oh.
an electric guitar in our own modified way.
Oh.
And his keyboard, he figured out how to sample on it. So he was sampling. This kid was way ahead.
Wow.
He was the kid who all the parents, most of them were not, they didn't allow their kids to hang out with him. They're like pretty sure, like, you know, like he might be satanic. He might be possessed by the devil. I was allowed to
Just
hang out.
because he was so smart, probably.
Maybe. He was a weird dude.
Yeah.
He was a dark, weird dude. And my best friend in the world and my earliest creative influence. And like I said, our moms had a connection, so we had a connection. But he was great. He was. They called my dad once to come and regulate him. Like, you know, Mr. Scotto got called. You knew all hell was breaking loose. And so we were writing songs as early as third grade.
Yeah. So you were not a late bloomer. You just you bloomed differently.
Sure. Yeah, late bloomer in classic education.
Yeah.
Early bloomer in
Right.
art and exploration and creation.
Yeah.
Very, very, very early.
Yeah.
Which wasn't cool until college too. So in high school, I
Yeah.
was not. It was not cool to be a musician. At least in my high school.
Yeah.
You're a dirtbag.
Yeah.
Pretty much, which was perfect again. Because then you weren't distracted by the trappings.
Right,
You were
right.
forced into that lane, which was the best lane in the world.
Yeah.
The creative lane, the
Yeah.
artsy lane.
That's great.
I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
What does it have to do with dumplings? Weren't we talking about dumplings?
I don't know. You started that. I don't know.
Folks,
I don't know.
Hit the Drum. Sarah Tantillo, educator, author. This is your fourth book?
Yes.
Fourth book. I have the Literacy Cookbook. If you're looking for... So this is stuff for teachers, but this is also stuff for human beings. I gleaned so many tips and ideas for my own writing and my own storytelling, and now I'm passing those tips that Sarah taught me to my own children. So they're learning how to read and write and respond to their ideas and respond to the things they've read, and that's great, and their teachers are awesome. But I've got a few tools for them too, and I share those, and they are 100% from you because they worked for me. And I want to thank you for hitting the drum in your own life and taking this path. And many of us have hit the drum for things that we've needed to get it going in a way. And it's really beautiful. It's really pure. And I'm just thankful to know you, and I'm thankful for the work you've done, and appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Mike. This has been a delight. I really appreciate it. I always love talking with you, and this has been really wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Maybe I'll see you at the next Dumpling Fest.
Please.
I will not see you on the golf course.
Please.
Until I just go and then I find out I don't suck as bad as I think I do. Yeah. We'll see what happens. Hit the drum. Have a good day. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.